Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to break down Jing Yuan's banner using min-maxing, theory crafting, and experience in Endgame to really give you guys the best information on whether or not he is worth pulling and his banner is a good investment for your free-to-play currency. Okay, so before we get started, of course, it goes without saying, if you like him, you like the design, you gotta have him, pull him. That's all there is to it. End of story. Let's move on now to people who are a little bit on the fence and are looking for a character for their power, utility, or kit, and maybe looking to bolster their account though. Now I've done a video like this, which I've made in the past, which compared Sele and Jing, but now that the game is out, we've learned so much more, and I've got a lot of new info for you guys. I've completed Memory of Chaos 10 and I can tell you how these units perform, their value and everything, and I've also got a ton of new info for you guys on Jing Yuan, his worth, and how it stacks up against units that we now know are coming in the future sooner rather than later. For a bit of an overview here on the 4 stars, I think if you do not have a copy of Jing Yuan already and you're at least interested in Jing, pulling one copy is absolutely a pretty good idea. And this is probably going to be one of your better chances to get her, and she is absolutely a powerhouse. And if you're pulling for Jing himself, it's a big bonus that you might get some Eidolons on Jing Yuan, as they are very strong, unless you're one of the few people who want to do specific speed tuning and wouldn't want her Eidolon 1, but the rest of the Eidolons are fantastic. As a free-to-play player, not having a second healer or someone who doesn't plan to pull on Luocha in the future, having more March Eidolons is absolutely going to be a massive benefit to your account, as she is probably going to be a mainstay on at least one of your teams as a tank or a preservation sustaining unit, so she's going to be pretty good to power up as well. Su Sheng is the weakest of the 3, so overall she's probably not going to have much staying power, but in the early days, if you only have one event banner 5-star character, for example only Jing Yuan, she will be a pretty good accompaniment on the other side as a main damaging carry, and she also can be brought as a sub DPS if you're looking to break some physical break on the toughness. Overall though, she won't be a big player in the future, I imagine, in the long term of the game, and will likely be outshone by 5-star event characters you'll likely inevitably get on your account at one point or another. Alright, with the 4 stars covered, let's move on to the main course, which is Jing Yuan himself here. Let's talk about whether or not he's worth it, how good he is, and how he will perform in Endgame now and in the future. So first and foremost, I'm going to give you guys the lowdown, but I'm going to assume you guys have a basic understanding of Jing Yuan's kit, and if you don't, I'm going to release a full guide pretty much within the next 24 to 48 hours, which is going to break down every single thing you need to know about him. Now, I always advise, let people test out the event banner character before you guys go ahead and spend all your free-to-play currency, so we can figure out if there's any glaring issues with the character and exactly how they perform, and maybe if they're even better than we thought. But if you guys are itching to get into it and you want a opinion now, let me get into the details. You guys can check out the review and the guide later on. So Jing Yuan is a DPS character first and foremost, and that means he is up against stiff competition. Most people are running 1 DPS, maybe 2, but mostly 1. And Jing Yuan definitely is going to want that primary pole position DPS role, which means he is going to be up against immediately the likes of Yanqing, Sele, as well as other damaging characters coming down the line. Now, fortunately for Jing, he is lightning, and lightning is a type which Sele and Yanqing are not. So he's not a direct competitor, he's a indirect competitor, but not direct. Overall, long term, at least for me, I'm going to want 1 primary damage dealer of each element leveled on my account so that I can pick the correct carry for the correct fight. So if there's a lot of lightning vulnerable enemies, I can bring Jing. There's a lot of quantum vulnerable enemies, I can bring Sele, and that'll feel pretty good, and I won't feel too bad about having both those characters on my account. What I would feel bad about though, if I was up against a lightning vulnerable enemy set and I had 2 lightning units, I wouldn't know which one to pick, and I might feel like I wasted my resources leveling one of them up when maybe I didn't need both of them because I could have just brought the stronger of the 2. Now, why am I mentioning this? Well, Jing Yuan absolutely smashes all of the lightning characters currently in the game, which is Serval as well as, Arlen, but it goes without saying that he's a 5-star. He should do that, and he absolutely does. But there is another 5-star event banner character looming in the distance, who is lightning, who is AoE, and might give Jing Yuan a run for his money, and that is Kafka. She is coming probably in 6 to 12 weeks if I had to speculate, and that is definitely not a massive amount of time away from Jing Yuan's release. So overall, I would probably say if you're pulling for Jing Yuan, you're probably not going to pull on Kafka, and if you plan to pull on Kafka, it's going to be a pretty tough call whether or not not you want Jing. But that is a call you guys are going to have to make. Having 2 lightning damage units isn't bad, but it's certainly going to be, long term, maybe not exactly what you want. And one of them maybe will end up on the bench if you do end up with 2 lightning units in that lightning scenario. So that's going to be something to consider first and foremost. Alright, what about competing with other DPS units though? Well, Jing Yuan actually does have a pretty good damage profile. He is a strong unit, so let's break it down. Seilei and Yangqing, they are single target units. How does Jing Yuan as an AoE unit compete against them in those scenarios? Well, he actually competes pretty well. Jing Yuan, despite being an AoE character, does really good single target damage. Really up there. He's very strong. I would only rank him just slightly below Yangqing in terms of his damage if Yangqing was geared and he was also against an ice vulnerable enemy. Meaning Jing Yuan has pretty big damage, especially with his signature light cone, which is definitely going to make him a lot more powerful. So he can compete, and he is going to be a good pickup right now in the landscape we are currently in. He's going to be fully capable of having enough single target damage to be brought to fights where enemies are not even vulnerable to lightning, and he absolutely smashes the rest of the 4-star damaging cast without any doubt at all. He is going to be a powerhouse, and you're not going to feel bad if you have him right now. He's going to be a big boon and a big asset, and he's absolutely going to be wanting to be a character who you're going to want to have leveled up. And for the foreseeable future, until we get more event banner DPS characters, I don't think that he's going to have any trouble taking the crown as a strong DPS unit. Now, when it gets to AoE, that's where Jing really starts to shine though. Jing is first and foremost an erudition character which specializes in AoE, and he is just straight up the best AoE character in the game, unless you're pitting him against Clara, when Clara is getting hit by many enemies consistently. Now, Clara can do that, she can be in that scenario, but there's definitely some downsides to getting hit a lot, and Jing doesn't have those downsides. He's going to do his AoE damage unconditionally in any situation that you put him in, which is a big deal. Now, his single target, is definitely beat out by Seilei and Yangqing, but his AoE is completely unmatched, and that is going to be one of the reasons you might want to consider pulling for him. Now, AoE is strong in Star Rail, but it's definitely not the focus. Single target absolutely is, at least in this first memory of Chaos, but there's definitely a place for AoE. There's a lot of fights that call for AoE, specifically lightning AoE, which brings me to my next point. Jing Yuan is a lightning unit, and there is a lot of lightning vulnerable enemies, at least in this memory of Chaos that we have up first. Now, it means that maybe there's not going to be as lightning enemies next time, but right now there is. So if you're interested in smashing through the memory of Chaos now for the next 3 weeks, well, Jing Yuan might be a pretty good option for you, and he definitely does seem to be pretty strong, at least in this memory of Chaos. Now, in addition to that, let's talk a little bit more about his lightning capabilities here. He is an excellent lightning breaker, namely because he has uncapped AoE for his skill and ultimate. His skill will hit everyone for lightning damage and also deal 1 break unit of lightning damage to them, which is pretty good. So if you have those robots, you can break all of them at once, and his ultimate will actually deal the same thing. He'll deal AoE damage to everyone and break every lightning AoE unit, 2 break units of damage, which means that you can fully wombo combo every unit on the field for 3 lightning break units instantly, which is really strong and is going to allow you to really mince up those robot waves in the first memory of Chaos. And if there ever is another set of lightning enemy units who are vulnerable to lightning, well, that's going to be a pretty free wave for you guys as well if you have Jing Yuan on your team. Now, it doesn't stop there though. So Jing Yuan's talent is his Lightning Lord. The Lightning Lord also does a ton of break. It has a maximum of 10 attacks, and every single attack does a half a break unit of lightning toughness. So he does 5 break units with a fully stacked Lightning Lord, meaning he is an absolute beast of breaking lightning damage on single targets as well as AoE. So he is really strong at breaking the toughness bar in single target and AoE scenarios. So he's definitely got a lot going for him, and he's going to be a pretty good lightning unit if you need to take down lightning vulnerable enemies. Good damage profile in AoE and single target, and great breaking. Alright, so that all sounds great. You're not planning on pulling for Kafka, you don't have Seilei or Yangqing, he's completely uncontested in the damage slot right now. Where do you sign up? Well, hold up. Let me give you guys a little bit more about the nuances of Jing Yuan and some things that you might want to consider with him specifically and his kit. First and foremost, his ultimate costs 130 energy, and his skill only generates 30. Now, he would like to be able to use his ultimate every 4 attacks, but with that energy cost, he actually simply cannot. 30 times 4 is 120. You do get 5 energy at the start. That's going to leave him 5 short, meaning his rotation is a little bit wonky. Now, most of the calculations you'll see online, specifically on Pridewin, are done with a 4 skill rotation. How do you achieve that though with that 5 missing energy? Well, you need to find it from somewhere. There's a lot of ways that you can get it. You can get it by putting him next to the tank and have him be hit. You can get it by getting a kill. You can also get it through other means like using a healer with Quid Quo Pro or the other energy regeneration light cone. You can also get it from his E4 or from a set piece on gear or an energy rope, but you can finally also get it from Jing Yuan, who is the character who is featured on his banner. But there is going to have to be some way that you fix his energy, otherwise you will lose a substantial amount of damage, breaking, and overall utility on Jing. So that is definitely something to consider. The next thing to talk about is the Lightning Lord. So Jing has a lot of break potential and reasonable AoE damage by himself, but the majority of his damage comes from the Lightning Lord. Now the Lightning Lord is its own entity. It is completely on its own. It does whatever it wants, whenever it wants, and it's pretty much controlled by the computer. And what it targets, how it targets, anything to do with it is completely random. So you're not going to have any control over it at all. Let me paint you guys a scenario. There is 2 enemies. There is one which absolutely needs to be broken and is vulnerable to lightning. And there's another one which is super low priority. Lightning Lord from Jing actually only breaks on the primary target it hits for. The cleave that it deals does not break, which means that you could just get unlucky and have the Lightning Lord fully attack the wrong enemy and not break the enemy that you were looking to break. That is absolutely a potential outcome. So it's not going to have the precision and the control that a character like Sally has in terms of pointing the damage where you want it. Now there's a lot of damage on offer, don't get me wrong, but the actual precision of that damage may definitely be a little bit up in the air, which is definitely a bit of a demerit for Jing Yuan. Fortunately, he makes up with that for big AoE numbers, but long term you may want to consider that he is definitely a bit of an RNG unit, especially when breaking enemies, but also when dealing damage. It's entirely possible that your massive 10 stack of Lightning Lord juice goes, on ads instead of the boss, where you would have just really liked it all to go on the boss. That is not within your control, and you definitely will have to take that into consideration when playing Jing Yuan. Next thing I want to talk about is going to be the speed of the golem, which is 60 baseline, which is actually incredibly slow. This thing is a turtle. It's moving like a glacier. It's very slow. To give you guys a bit of perspective, Sally is 115 speed, so this thing is almost half the speed of baseline Sally before she even uses a skill. Whew, that is slow. However, we also know that Jing Yuan can speed up the golem when he uses his abilities though, which is very, very good. And also the golem gains 3 stacks of this buff for free. It's going to get 3 stacks, and that could, in theory, give it speed. However, unfortunately, in closed beta 3, the stacks that it gains baseline do not grant speed. And unless they change that for live, it's going to be having that 60 base speed pretty much permanently, unless Jing Yuan uses his technique, skill, or ultimate, which now means that you have to use your skill or ultimate or technique in order to speed that bad boy up. Now, you don't actually mandatory have to do it. You can play Jing Yuan just using the basic attack and have the Lightning Lord just smash with 60 base speed. You could do that. It's definitely viable. It could actually be good even. But if you want the Lightning Lord to do a massive amount of damage, you need to speed it up. And overall, there is quite a lot of finickiness with the Lightning Lord, especially in the Memory of Chaos. Now, we're not going to go into it too much, as it's kind of something you have to show rather than tell, but it's fair to say that the Lightning Lord is going to be strongest when you can line up using Jing Yuan's skill or ultimate right after it smashes. So ideally, it would smash and then you would use your skill and ultimate. And that does introduce a little bit of a factor here of min-maxing with Jing Yuan. I'm not entirely sure how the exact stuff is going to work out, but if you can line up that scenario consistently, well, you're going to be in for a lot more damage. And making sure that you can execute that might be a little bit finicky in combat. If you wanted to save your ultimate for right after the smash, that could be pretty good. But then there's another thing pulling you in another direction here, and that is that Jing Yuan would always like the Lightning Lord to have at least 6 stacks of his buff. So he gets 3 baseline and the skill generates 2. You're going to either need to use 2 skills or an ultimate to get this online and be at maximum smash capacity, which is definitely not hard to do, but it is probably going to mean that you're going to want to invest in speed for Jing Yuan to really get the most out of him. There's probably going to be multiple builds that you can go with him, but there definitely does seem to be quite a lot of incentives here to go for speed. Now, that's definitely not going to be cut and dry though. We'll get into that in a future video, but basically the point is here, Lightning Lord, super duper slow, definitely a lot of min-max potential, and that may or may not be up your street, but if it is, that's pretty good. But if it's not, I totally think that it could be something you might want to consider before pulling for Jing. Now, be rest assured, he's still going to be super duper good even if you don't min-max him. He's going to do a ton of damage, he's going to smash everything. The Lightning Lord is going to go boom. But there is definitely quite a lot of min-max potential on his kit. Lastly, I want to mention here is how Jing interacts with the current supporting cast of Ting Yun and Bronya, two premier supporting units. So Jing Yuan's damage predominantly comes from his Lightning Lord. We've learned that much, and it is a complete beast. But the Lightning Lord is not something that you can quite easily buff, because it is not an entity you can target. It is like a separate controlled entity in the ether. So it is not something you could, for example, boost with Bronya, although that would be great. You have to boost Jing Yuan, and then he needs to buff the golem, and then the golem gets to do the damage. The problem with that is that Bronya's buff only lasts one turn, her skill activation I'm talking here. So if you do decide to boost Jing Yuan, he will get the advance forward, which is great. He will deal increased damage for that skill, or for that ultimate. But then after his turn ends, and the Lightning Lord smashes, he lost the buff. It's gone, because he had the buff, not the Lightning Lord. So he actually doesn't have that much synergy with Bronya's skill specifically, and you won't be getting the increased damage that you're looking for unless you have her E6, which a lot of us, including me, do not have. So that's definitely a little bit rough. In addition to that, you're gonna have to try and focus on buffing the Lightning Lord and not Jing himself, because Jing doesn't really do that much damage unless it's like 3-target AoE or more. So when you're using Bronya's ultimate, you kind of want to use it before the Lightning Lord smashes instead of using Jing Yuan, because you want him to be buffed, but you don't want to be buffing him, if that makes sense. This also goes for Ting Yun. You would like to be buffing him, ideally Jing Yuan, with the ultimate and stuff like that when the Lightning Lord is about to attack, and not when Jing Yuan is about to attack. So that is also going to introduce another interesting element to his gameplay there. He definitely does have a few downsides in that he cannot take advantage of those one-turn buffs when they're placed on him, because his Lightning Lord is going to go after him. That also goes for the actual Blessing of Amber, which is the featured Memory of Chaos bonus here for Erudition and Hunt characters. He'll get the extra action, he'll get the extra damage, but then his Lightning Lord, which goes after him, won't, which is definitely a bit unfortunate. He definitely scales pretty well with support still, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely some downsides to be had with the way that he functions in the end game. So definitely something to consider, and definitely something to look out for. So the question remains, should you pull Jing? Well, he is a great unit, massive AoE, massive damage, has good 4 stars on the banner, very worth pulling. Let's see how he measures up against what's coming though. So Silver Wolf is a support coming out, and she is unique. Supports are definitely less important than getting 5-star DPS on your account for clearing Memory of Chaos though. However, Silver Wolf has something Jing doesn't, and that is staying power. There's going to be a dime a dozen DPS, and there's going to be units that come out which do exactly what Jing does very, very quickly. So in terms of long-term investment, Silver Wolf is likely a better option for a 5-star than Jing Yuan, assuming that she comes out and she is not completely terrible and nerfed to the ground. So that is my assessment on Silver Wolf. Moving on to Luocha, he is a healer. You definitely want to have at least 2 sustaining characters for Memory of Chaos. If you don't have a second sustaining character yet, Luocha might be a better option than Jing, as you really do want that flexibility in building teams, and Luocha looks like he will be quite a powerful healer and sustaining unit. So overall, you might want to skip Jing for Luocha if you want to go down that route. Next up is Kafka and Blade, who are likely coming out after both of these guys based on Closed Beta 2. They were in there, they were featured, they were fully playable, so it's likely they are going to come next. Kafka is an AoE lightning unit who is going to be in direct competition to Jing. We've already discussed that, so that is a consideration. And then right after is Blade, a wind destruction AoE damaging character as well. Again, likely going to be at least a bit of competition in the role of AoE for Jing. So you definitely have a lot of options there, and whether or not you want to pull for Jing is gonna be dependent on what is coming down the pipe. It's a pretty high chance that Silver Wolf and Luocha are coming next, so you're going to have to strongly consider how you want to invest. Alright guys, to finish us off, no one can tell you guys what to pull. That is your decision. All we can do is give you some info on how things might play out. Of course, this is all subject to change as well. But let me give you guys what I would do personally. So if it was me and I was free to play right now and I did not have a second healer, I would save for Luocha. As not having a healer in Memory of Chaos, I personally would want that as soon as possible to enable me to have the flexibility to build teams the way I wanted to. However, if I had a second healer or a second sustaining character like Bailu or Japad, I would absolutely pull for Jing Yuan, as having a 5-star DPS is going to make clearing and 3-starring the Memory of Chaos and increasing my Stellar Jade income substantially easier. Now, if I was investing for the future though, and I knew I was going to play for the long term, and I didn't care about losing some Stellar Jades in the short term though, I would pull for Silver Wolf, as I don't know when she would be rerun again, and I think that that weakness application to apply a vulnerability could be quite strong. It is entirely possible Silver Wolf releases and she's not that good, but in that case, you would be able to quickly follow up with Kafka or Blade, who would be coming out some weeks, hopefully hopefully after Silver Wolf drops. So I think you can't really go wrong with anything you do necessarily, but there definitely is going to be a lot of DPS on offer in the future, so strongly consider your options. But at least Ting Yun is a premier support, so you're going to get that at the very least on top of your Jing Yuan if you do decide to pull him. Alright guys, if you liked this video or you learned something new, make sure to subscribe to the channel and chuck it up a thumbs up if you really enjoyed it. But until next time, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Cheers.